going to begin our study over polynomials, and we're going to start with our first very basic polynomial, which is a monomial. And you want to look at the two boxes here on the left. Now, these boxes represent things that are monomials, and these boxes represent things that are not monomials. So if we look at these first 9 boxes, what do we see that could represent a monomial? Well, we notice that if I have just numbers, that could be a monomial. If I have variables, that could be a monomial. And if I have a product of numbers and variables, those represent monomials. Well, what's the difference in what's in these boxes and what is in these boxes? Well, I notice here I have a number and a variable that are being added. Here I have a variable in the denominator. Here I have a variable underneath the radical. So those represent things that are not monomials. So variables underneath radicals, variables in the denominator, and addition and subtraction. Now we want to go through and look at some of the vocabulary terms that we talked about or that was on your vocabulary wall list. And the first one says, a blank is a monomial with no variables. So that means I have just a number. And if I have just a number, that is a constant. That is a constant. And from our previous examples above, these were some of the constants. We had a 2, we had a 0, we had a negative 8.5, we had a 5/3, and we had the square root of 5. Notice those were terms that had no variables, and I'm going to refer to those as constants. When we're talking about a monomial, the blank is the numeric factor of the variable or variables. And I like to say it's the number being multiplied by the variable. And at this point, you should know that that is our coefficient. So some examples from our previous tables. We had the 2 and 2x. We had the negative 8.5 and negative 8.5xy squared. We had the 5/3 in the term 5/3 y squared, and we had the 9 in the term 9a squared b cubed c to the 7th. So remember, the number being multiplied by the variable is known as a coefficient. Well, the blank of a monomial is the sum of the exponents on the variables only. So if we look at the variables, and we look at the sum of their exponents, that's going to give me what this column is called, which is the degree. So what's the degree of this one? Well, the variable on the exponent's 2. And what's the degree here? And remember, be careful here. There's an understood 1 with the x, and there's a 2 with the y, 1 plus 2, because it says it is the sum. So this degree is 3. We come over here in this monomial. I have a 2 on the A, I have a 3 on the B, I have a 7 on the C. Remember, it is the sum of the exponents on the variables. So that would give me a degree of 12. Notice here I have no variable, nor do I have a variable here, which means there is no exponents, so those would be degree of 0. So those are some of the vocabulary terms when we're dealing with monomials. We now want to look at our investigation with polynomials. Okay, a polynomial is a monomial or the sum of monomials. So if I have a one-term polynomial, I have a monomial. Notice there is no plus or minus sign, and that's what we're going to do to separate our terms is the addition or subtraction sign. I have a subtraction sign, which means I have a monomial here, I have a monomial here, so I have 2 terms or a binomial. Here I have a plus sign, 2 plus signs, which brings me to have 3 terms, and a 3 term is a trinomial. And then here I have 2 addition signs and a subtraction sign, which means I have 4 terms, or I could have more than 4 terms, and that's going to be called a polynomial. So when we're looking at polynomials, they're classified as 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms or more. We're just going to use a polynomial. One way that I try to remember the different types of polynomials: when you're single, you're a monomial. When you're married, you and your spouse become binomials. And when you have your first child, it's you, your spouse, and your baby. And so then you have a family, which is your trinomial. And then last but not least, we want to look at what is the degree of a polynomial. Well, it equals the highest degree of the monomial terms. So we have to look at the monomials in the polynomial, and then the highest degree is going to be the degree of my polynomial. So I have a 2 and I have a 1, but the highest degree would be a 2, and so for the degree of this binomial is 2. I have a 2, a 1, and a 0, and then the highest degree is a 2, so then that's a second degree polynomial. And here I have a 5, I have a 3, I have a 2, I have a 0, 5, 3, 2, 0, and of course the highest degree is 5. So this is kind of a short video to clarify some of the vocabulary that we're going to be looking at when we deal with polynomials. See you in class.